killing spree. Double kill. Welcome to the Culture Codex.
Hello, we're here with Jeff Steitzer. Jeff, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here.
You just returned from the San Diego Comic-Con. How was that?
It was amazing. It was like all Comic-Cons. It doesn't matter, how big or how small they are. If you're relatively busy, all you do for a couple of days is you sit at a table with occasional bathroom breaks and even more occasional, cups of coffee or food from 9 a.m. until sometimes 7 p.m, which is what we did. And it was strange because I was actually raised for part of my youth in San Diego. So I still have a cousin who lives there with her husband, and I stayed with them, which was great because if I hadn't, I would literally have been at the hotel next door to the convention center. I wouldn't have seen anything at all. And it was beautiful while we were there. Yeah. So it was great to be able to get away from the convention. And of course, the problem is that I was in one hall and all these other things that were going on that I didn't know about till after I got home. And they started popping up on YouTube. It's like, George Lucas was there? I didn't know that, because it was nowhere near where I was.
Gotcha.
But I mean, on the whole, it was great. And then that was a case where I stayed an extra day, which allowed me to go, and I actually got to revisit the house I had lived in back in the 1960s.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's great.
In a little suburb there. And then we went to Balboa Park, which is amazing. I've been there in the past as an actor, as a grown-up, but there were a couple of other things that were cool to see. So, yeah, it was really, really great.
That's awesome. Yeah, being in your 70s, still going to all these conventions, good for you, man.
It's a little more exhausting than it used to be.
I'm sure.
But it's still incredible fun. I really have a great time.
That's great. So, yeah, we want to start off with, I guess, your backstory. I feel like both of us don't really know much about the voice acting industry. So, like, how do you end up saying, oh, okay, I want to be a voice actor one day? So, like, what's your backstory on getting into the industry in general?
I didn't think that. I didn't say it. It never even occurred to me. Here's how it happened. For me, and this is one of the things I'm always a little bit embarrassed about because, I'd gone to Seattle, Washington from the Midwest where I'd been living after I'd been in San Diego. And I came out to Seattle. I got an audition for a theater company called The Empty Space, which was this crazy, rock and roll kind of enterprise. It was really amazing for its time.
Yeah.
And we started doing shows. And about midway through the first season, I was there with an ensemble company of actors. We were approached by people about doing commercials. And, there was a guy who loved our work and he didn't want announcer type, the announcer type, which was sort of common at the time. He wanted like actors who could play characters. And it was like, sure, make a little extra money.
Yeah.
In my case, what happened was, we had a great, great time, did a number of things with him. And then the fellow who was his engineer at the studio where we would go to record, he and I hit it off, got along like a house on fire. And so when he would be told by clients that they were looking for voice talent, he'd say, well, I know this guy. So for a number of years, my primary focus was in theater work. First as an actor and then as a director. But all along the way, I was doing commercials and that kind of thing. Eventually, I moved into doing some games, very early games. In fact, I remember being called into audition for a game called Phantasmagoria. And I didn't know what these games were. And I auditioned for it. I didn't get it, but I was intrigued. And I thought, I should really know more about this. And I didn't at that point have a computer. This is how long ago this was, the early 80s, was it? Yeah, I think it was. And so I thought, well, I should probably get a computer and learn how to use it. And of course, it turned out it wasn't that hard at all. And I started playing games, including Phantasmagoria and The Seventh Guest and The 11th Hour. And most impressionably for me, Myst, which is this amazing game. If you don't know about it, go check it out on Wikipedia. It's unbelievable. It was, so cool. So then it was like, well, this is interesting, So in addition to corporate narration and commercials and stuff, I began to do some games, which is what eventually led to an audition for a game they were going to be doing out at Microsoft that nobody knew anything about because it was so under wraps. Halo.
Wow. Yes.
That's incredible.
So how were you approached generally? Like, did somebody...
Well, in the early days, people would just call me up.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
What happened there's a big difference in terms of how we do things now and how we did things then. What would happen is that if you had an agent, your agent would call you and say, you've got an audition at one of the many recording studios in Seattle. And you go, got it. You'd note it down. And on the day you'd drive down, you'd park your car, you'd go in, you'd check in, you'd go to a waiting area where everybody you knew was also waiting to go in and audition. And you'd laugh and catch up and be told to shut up because it was, leading through to the recording that people were doing. And then eventually you'd go in and you would record your audition and you'd either get a call back or the job or nothing. But it was like, that's the way things used to work. Before I had an agent, the people at the studios would sometimes call me to say, can you come in and audition for a commercial we're doing? And I'd always say, of course. I never said no, and that's what happened. But then I was running a theater in Seattle, a contemporary theater. Was I running it, or maybe I was just the associate artistic director at that point? And I got a call one day from one of the casting people in Seattle, and she said, we're casting a TV movie, and we'd like you to audition. And it was like, oh, okay. I hadn't, been doing any of that kind of stuff. But I thought, sure. So I went down and I auditioned, and I got a call back, and it was all very exciting, and I was all dressed up in my suit for the call back. And as I sat there, there was this guy walking up the hallway to me. His name was Kevin Tighe. Now, Kevin Tighe was, I can't remember exactly what big series he was on back in the 60s, 70s, whatever it was. But in recent years, he'd done a lot of films with John Sayles, like 8 Men Out and Mate One, always playing heavies. He was the father of the guy who had been in the wheelchair in the series Lost, who actually pushed him out the window. Well, that was Kevin. So Kevin walks up the hall, and I think, well, I'm not going to get this if Kevin's waiting for the same thing I am. So I went and I did my call back, and it was clear because he'd gone in earlier. And you could just tell it was all over. They had no interest in me being there. But then afterwards, the casting person came out and she said, do you have an agent? And I said, no, actually, I've been thinking about maybe I should get one. And she said, well, who are you thinking about? And I mentioned an agent in town. She said, well, I'm sure they'd be happy to have you, but there's this other agent who's just started her own business, and it's kind of a boutique agency. You might get more, auditions from her because there are fewer people in your agency competing for those auditions.
Yeah.
I thought, oh, okay, I'll think about that. And of course, the way I tend to work is like, yeah, I'll think about that in like 4 months, 5 months. What was the rush? The next morning at 9 a.m., I'm sleeping and I get a phone call. It's the agent. Topo Swope was her name. And she said, I understand you're looking for an agent. And I was like, yeah. I'd love to represent you. And I was like, okay. And she said, in the meantime, I can't see him. This was on a Friday. She said, I can't see you till Monday, but I'd love to meet with you on Monday. And I went, okay. And she said, do you mind if I send you out this afternoon for an audition for a TV series called Northern Exposure, which shot in Seattle? And I was like, I guess. I mean, I didn't have a resume. I didn't have photos. I didn't have anything because I didn't ever need them. So I whipped something up and I got the copy and I ran out there and I read.
Nice.
And I thought, oh, that's pretty good for an Asian. So that was what happened. That's how I got the Halo audition. Was they contacted her, and then she suggested me. They said, yeah, we want to see him, and they called me in.
That's awesome. God.
Wow.
Yeah, crazy story. Again, I'm not sure how true this is because it's on Wikipedia, but on your Wikipedia page, it says you're from like this small town in South Dakota.
I was born in Deadwood, South Dakota.
Gotcha. Okay.
Deadwood is where the TV series Deadwood was set.
Oh, yeah.
This old West town. It's where Wild Bill Hickok was shot in the back of the head while playing poker. It was also the home of Calamity Jane and a character that nobody remembers named Preacher Smith, who was important at the times. It was one of the places where people panned for gold. And so we were there for 6 months, and then we moved to Sioux Falls, and I am the oldest of 5. And then my dad took us out to San Diego, and that's how I ended up. That's what I remember growing up. So I didn't grow up, weirdly enough, in a small town. I grew up in a suburb of a fairly large town.
Gotcha.
But as a kid, there's only so far you're allowed to go on your own. So I might as well have been living in a small town for all that I interacted with San Diego. And then when I was about 11 years old, we moved to Cedar Rapids, Iowa, which was a fairly small town. And but it was also a great place to live because you could go anywhere and do anything you wanted to. It was so, I'm so old. Back in the day, it's like you could go anywhere and not have to worry about it. Your parents would basically kick you out of the house at 9 a.m. and say, don't come back till lunch.
Yeah, right.
And a lunch is like, don't come back till supper. And then they would ring the bell when you were playing out, when it got dark. And it's like, come on in now, And I used to walk downtown to the library,
Nice.
I used to drive everywhere. And, it just never thought about it twice.
That's pretty wild. I do want to get into the AI aspect because obviously it's making some pretty crazy moves with the voice cloning. As somebody like yourself in that industry, do you see it as a threat, especially in the next like 5 or 10 years? Because frankly, you can say if I wanted to grab your voice, I can put it into like an AI in 11 Labs or voice AI and replicate it to almost exactly like what you would say in those Halo games. Does that make you feel a bit uncomfortable?
Well, somebody asked me, in a different interview, they said, when the time comes that you were to pass away, would you object if they were to use your voice for the games? And it was kind of like, oh, I won't be there. As far as AI is concerned, it's weird. I don't doubt that it will happen. I don't doubt that there will be a lot of people who will grab it and want to go with it. Yeah. But again, I'm old enough to remember a time not that long ago when people were taking snippets from old, 20s, 30s, 40s movies of movie stars, and they were making new commercials with them. So I think it might have been Fred Astaire dancing instead of with like a broom. He was dancing with some sort of a mop or something was being sold. I can't remember what it was, but, and they were sort of working them into commercials and stuff. It was a fad. It didn't last that long. And the reason that I ultimately don't think it will persist is that it is a solution that is the cheapest route to go. Right. In some ways. Eventually it'll be so cheap, it won't cost anything to do it. Yeah. And why pay a living, breathing human being for their voice if you can just basically replicate it? But what you can't replicate are all the years of life experience.
Exactly.
That are a part of the person who's doing the voice acting, and which absolutely, inspires and impacts the kind of reading they would give. I mean, unless they become incredibly sophisticated, much more sophisticated than I can imagine, I just don't think they can do that,
Right.
They don't have as much to draw on as I do.
Right.
I think that leads into like an important point about AI. Like when I read papers or articles or just anything that is generated through artificial intelligence, it's always missing something that you can't really, I think, put your finger on. And it's kind of, I think you put it well, Jeff. It's like that lived experience or something that's, I think, you could say sacred or special about being human. And I'm assuming everybody believes we're all truly unique, and I think that's reflected in people's work, whether it's voice acting, writing,
Right.
Directing. It could be anything. I think
absolutely.
it's reflected in people's work.
I'll give you a concrete example. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the thriller writer Lee Child. He writes the Jack Reacher books.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Recently, he decided he was going to step away from that, and he started kind of working with his brother, Andrew Child. And you can tell from the first book that it's not the same author, even though he sort of had input into it. Andrew had done most of the writing, and you can tell, if you're a fan of the series, it's not the same, even though he's trying to create a very similar experience. There's also a woman out, is her name Diane Capri, maybe? And she does these books that are meant to be sort of homages to the Reacher books, where Reacher's a character in her stories, but you never meet him. They only ever refer to him, as somebody who's out in the world in which the other characters, her characters, inhabit. And again, she's trying to do a very Reacher-like thing, just not the same, because it isn't Lee Child. It isn't based on his experiences, his enthusiasms, his reading, his viewing, his, whatever he's done. All of that is going to go into the work he does. I think it's going to be true for any artist. They may fool them for a while. Think of all the painters, who had their work pirated and then sold through the years and stuff. But eventually that all comes out. So, and I just don't think it, I don't know. We'll see. There's, I can only sort of guess in my hazy crystal ball, but I think we're probably good for a little while longer. I hope so.
Yeah, me too.
Well, and just to even push the AI thing a little bit further, I just reflect on your body of work. I'll take Halo for an example. There's I feel like each game that you've worked on, there's a very, at least from my perspective, a very intentional style and a very there's personality to the work you do. Even from the first game, Halo Combat Evolved, to Halo Infinite, and I think there's something really special about that. And if someone were to ask me what if we had artificial intelligence do it? I'm just get the fuck. I don't know. It doesn't. It would worry me if that was the route we were to just take. But I think you put it well. I would imagine they have to become so sophisticated that it's beyond my imagination. So I'm glad you're optimistic about that.
That makes us feel better.
Sometimes I do
generally optimistic, even living in the times I'm living in.
Yeah. Speaking of the times that we're living in now, we see those voice actors already fighting those studios for, over those AI protections, especially with labor unions. Do you think that this labor battle connects to larger worker movements happening across other industries as well?
Well, I think all the unions are undergoing some real, stormy times. Let's be honest about it. I mean, there is such a huge movement to try and basically abolish all the unions, so that the corporate interests can make even more money than they already do.
Right.
There was a wonderful thing I saw. Bill Burr was talking to somebody about, how he wasn't against people becoming billionaires, but when your employees, aren't making enough money.
Yeah.
I saw that.
Yeah, me too.
It's like, well, that's just not right. And it's kind of the way I feel because, we're talking about people who are using their money to buy an island. It's not like they're going to live on their island all the time. They just, they want to say, I've got an island.
Right.
It all seems so pointless. I mean, I wish there was some way to really persuade them. You are going to die and you can't take it with you.
Yeah, exactly.
Is it making you happy? Because when we see you, you never look happy,
Right.
And it's like you could certainly make yourself happy and a lot of other people happy by doing good works. And that is just something that, people talk one game and then just don't, go through with it at all,
Right. Yeah, and I feel like a lot of those guys with tremendous amounts of wealth, they eventually they hit a point to where they lose like the humanity aspect. They don't even act human.
It becomes so
anymore.
Disconnected
I
from
know.
other people.
I mean, they are so out there that and believe it or not, there was a study done with the game Monopoly, and they had two people just play a regular game of Monopoly, and they had somebody start out pretty much in poverty, and then they had the other person start out with extreme amounts of wealth. And they recorded it all like on camera and everything. And believe it or not, like the body movements and how they reacted to things in general, it literally changed the way they played the game and on how they acted throughout like the whole session. So which I found pretty interesting. And
I'm very much so.
Yeah, and I feel like that's what we're seeing a lot of in real life.
No, I think that's absolutely right. It's interesting because, again, I'm old enough to remember a time back in I don't remember it because I would have been a little bit young, but during the 50s with the HUAC trials, when, the ultra-conservative wing of the Congress was going after all these people, trying to basically, scare folks about other countries and all that kind of stuff. And when they went after Hollywood, a number of Hollywood people, basically revealed themselves to be very right-wing. And you think, well, that's so interesting, especially if you know their biographies. Many of them grew up incredibly poor. Filmmakers like Frank Capra, who directed It's a Wonderful Life, or wonderful actors like Barbara Stanwyck. Walt Disney, basically wanted to make sure that all the communists were rounded up and sent out of the country, which is not to diminish the dangers of the communists of that period, but it was this insane frenzy, not altogether unlike what we see now. And I think from their perspective, they had worked so hard and obsessively to get themselves to where they ended up that at a certain point, it was like, no one's taken a thing from me. They didn't want taxes. They didn't want government interfering. I think a lot of people get that way when they become, incredibly rich.
Yeah.
And they start to believe that they're infallible. My dad was, at his level, a very successful businessman. He was Republican. My mom had come from a Democratic family, but she sort of joined his side. And he used to talk about how the Republicans were the ones that looked after his interests. And it was like, no, Dad, no. They're too small, right? If you were a large corporate interest, you betcha, but don't delude yourself that they care about you, which is exactly what we're seeing now.
Yeah,
Small business owners are, being absolutely driven into extinction.
Yeah.
By all these other companies like Amazon and places like that. It's crazy. It really is.
Shit doesn't change.
Well, and then that just I think back to my own experience. I mean, there's so many times in the town that I live in and grew up in where you just see these small businesses go in and out like a revolving door.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it is really sad too, because, I feel like these are the people that should be getting, I guess, more support, And I mean, there's other things you can look at with wealth too. Like, I feel like people, once you make so much money, there's like a certain point where there's like diminishing returns almost. Where it's like,
yeah.
I mean,
The
how much
constant expansion.
happier will like money make you?
Yeah,
you know? Like,
yeah. There's a point.
you got to find some way, I feel like, to there's a lot of people that need help. You know what I mean? And it's like if you have the ability to help people, morally it makes sense to do it.
Right. Yeah.
Well, and again, I mean, part of the problem is we're in an era when an awful lot of people seem to have no moral or ethical sense whatsoever.
It's true.
How
Unfortunately.
did that happen, and why did that happen? You know, look at all the people who used to espouse the exact opposite of what they're espousing now in the Republican Party. The ones who dismissed Trump when he was first on the scene and who've done a 180-degree shift. You know, it's like, what happened to them? Do they believe it? It's hard to believe that they do.
Sure.
But it gives them a chance to gain power. To what end? They don't use their power for anything useful.
Right.
You know, you're for money. What are you using your money for? How many cards do you need? You know, how many planes do you need?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know. It's weird. I'm currently reading a book called No New Things, which is very intriguing because it was this woman who decided that for a month, 30 days, she was not going to buy anything new, with a couple of exceptions, like things like that, because we're a culture that, thanks to advertising, has been, sold the idea that we deserve every impulse buy we want.
Yeah.
We deserve it. We don't just get it. We deserve it. You deserve this, that, or the other. And, they're selling a lifestyle that, does it make you happy? Is it really the lifestyle you want? I think a lot of it comes down to the fact that a lot of people don't sort of take the time to think about, what do I really want? What's really important? I've been reading a lot about death in recent years because, that's where we're all headed, but me first and sooner and probably. And, one of the points that was made by one of the authors was like, they had worked with people who were dying, and they said there was not one person who sat there and talked about their possessions and, how much they were going to miss them. It was always about people. And the ones who had regrets were that they didn't spend more time with their family, that they didn't resolve things when they'd had, arguments and conflicts with people. They didn't make it up. They hadn't done the things for other people or made that kind of impression in their lives. It's like, well, that's the kind of thinking people need to do, it seems to me, because the last thing in the world you want to do is find yourself at the end of your time going, oh, I blew it.
Well, I think that's a lot of great points to make right there. And I think that kind of leads into our next topic. Is there a way you think that like your work and your industry can like sort of bring people together? I know I see you going out to conventions a lot. What are your thoughts on that?
Couple of thoughts about that. First of all, I think it's already happening. I mean, that's what games do, is that very often it brings people together. And one of the things I hear most is about people who've been playing with their closest friends most of their lives, And so it has created a community at that level. In many instances, it has created a much larger national and international community of people who are all brought together by the game. I don't know that the game over and above that is, from a polemical point of view, it's a first-person shooter game.
Yeah. Oh, man.
Nobody ever is going to understand the flood. You just have to kill or escape them.
Yeah.
So in terms of teaching life lessons, I'm not sure that that's necessarily all that's useful. But I do think that it is very useful to understand that we are not separate. That if there is anything I believe in, is that everything is interrelated. We are all one thing. There is no us or them. There is we together. And the only way to sort of get past the divisiveness that we see in our country and throughout the world right now is to really embrace that idea and meet people on a one-to-one basis. I've gone to a lot of conventions at this point. Many of them have been in very conservative states, what you would call red states.
Yeah.
I have not once had anybody proselytize to me or challenge me about what I might believe or try to promote something. That's not what they're like. They're like everybody I meet. Everybody I meet is like everybody else I meet, no matter where I am. And I believe that, in fact, even though there are, of course, going to be some differences, when it comes right down to it, what do we all want? We want a good life. What do we want to do? Most of us want to find a partner for life. Ideally, that would be great. Many of us want to have children, right? When you have children, what do you want for them? You want it to be better for them than it was for you. You want them to be protected. You want them to be healthy. You want them to excel in whatever way they can. You want to have a house that you can take shelter in. You want to be fed. You want to be clothed. We all share the same basic wants and needs. A lot of the other stuff becomes gravy when you suddenly decide, well, I need this, $350 game system.
Yeah.
My kids had to hear no on that for the Xbox because I'd already bought them a PlayStation and what was the other one? They had two gaming systems. It was like, no, I'm not going to buy one just so you can play Halo.
Right. Yeah.
But I think we think that having things is what's important. Having things is not what is important. And the best thing we can do is not wait for anybody else to take control of the situation, but to start with ourselves and in our interactions with people, no matter where we go. Try it sometime. You're walking down the street, you might catch somebody's eye. We try very hard not to, but you might. If you catch their eye, smile at them and they'll smile back, right? And it's kind of like, you don't know what they believe. You don't know what their life experience is. I talk to people all the time, just, how you doing? Isn't it a great day? Don't we live in a beautiful part of the world? And, oh my God, what an adorable child you've got. And they light up,
Yeah.
Random acts of kindness are important and on a very personal level. And then just keep going with that, with more and more things.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
I think there's a wonderful video I just saw. Jordan Klepper, that guy on the Daily Show.
Oh, yeah. Oh, he's fantastic. Yeah.
It's amazing. Goes to all these MAGA rallies and all this kind of stuff. Well, he went to something, he was shooting something, and there was a guy at the MAGA rally who's like sort of a celebrity in those settings. He's a guy that dresses in a suit that looks like a brick wall.
Yeah.
And sometimes, Trump brings him up on stage and all that kind of stuff. And apparently he was like hassling them all the time they were shooting at this one event. Telling people, it's like, don't listen to those fuckers, blah, 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 blah. And, making a real nuisance. It was, according to Klepper, it was a hellish experience. And then they were all trying to leave wherever they were. And the weather was bad. And so they all had to stay one more night. And the next day everybody else had flown to where they were going to fly. And he'd gone to the airport. And there were only two people in the airport. It was him and the guy in the suit. And he had 3.5 hours. The flight was delayed, right? Oh. So he started talking to the guy, or the guy might have started talking to him, and they talked for 3.5 hours. And it's like he realized that he had completely gotten this guy wrong in a lot of ways. He hadn't seen anything beyond the way he presented himself or the way he was behaving under those circumstances. And, he said it was real eye-opening. And I think we would all find that to be the case if we took the time to talk to people. Doesn't mean you have to necessarily change what you believe if you really believe in it. But it's like, why not question everything?
Right.
That's a good point to make. Because I know, like in my personal life, there's people I know that I see some of the things they post on the internet, and obviously my reactions are like, wow, that's crazy, or like that's, in some ways, sometimes I feel it's repulsive. But then I think back to like my personal interactions with these people throughout my life, and I can probably name more positive ones than negative ones when it's when you're in an impersonal setting. So I think I guess the way I would put it is like, one way we could talk about improving our relations with other people and sort of getting back together is like, you could say it's a collective effort, but it requires, I guess, like individual random acts of kindness, as you said.
Yeah.
Because I think generally, like, I guess the saying goes is like, most people want the same like positive things, and even though it seems like it can be difficult to grasp that, especially with like what people say online, I guess we all have a responsibility to really consider everything, I guess. I know it's a little bit more complicated than that, but.
Well, and again, a lot of it's a matter of like taking a big step back and sort of looking at the larger picture, because I think we're so in the middle of all of this noise,
Yeah.
that it becomes so incredibly oppressive. And I think that's also part of the strategy, So everybody, it seems to me, should ideally look at more than one news source for their news, just to see. There was a time when I grew up, again, I often describe myself as a visitor from another century. Well, as a visitor from another century, back in the day, there were literally only 3 television networks. And if in fact you went to some places, like when we would visit my cousin and my uncle and aunt in South Dakota, we were living in San Diego at that point, they only had 2 networks. The one that was missing was the one that had all the great Western shows that I was addicted to. And a week was, an eternity before I could get home and watch TV. Right. But so, there was a certain uniformity in terms of the way news was presented. It's not that it was necessarily better. Obviously, there was a certain amount of conformity back in the 1950s and 60s, and that all sort of exploded. But now it's very easy to latch onto one person, I don't care who it is, and take what they say as gospel. And it's like, we're sentient beings. We have an amazing ability. We can make up our own minds, right? So rather than just parroting what we hear, which we all do,
Absolutely.
we end up running around, saying, well, this is what I heard that appealed to my prejudice. So I'm going to go ahead and spread this out in the world as well. But it's like, shut up for a while and actually listen,
Yeah.
and look at a few more sources, and you might get a better picture of what's really going on. It seems to me. We're, as a culture, we are so self-absorbed and so focused on ourselves. It's one of the problems that actors always have, because, we're trained to ask, what do I want? What do I need as a character? And what am I going to do about overcoming the obstacle? And that's a very different perspective, and a wrong perspective, I think, from what improvisers are taught, which is, what is the guy that I'm doing my scene with need to make them look like a genius? And it's kind of like, oh, it's interesting. If, again, our perspective was, where are they coming from? What kind of a day are they having? What kind of a life are they having? Because we're all so privileged. We really, really are. We've never known. People, when I think about, and I've been this way as well, my internet goes out and I am just insane. Those fuckers at the place where, how can this happen to me?
Yeah.
And then I pick up I turn on the news and I read about what's happening in Gaza. And it's kind of like, oh,
Yeah.
a lot worse. And it shouldn't be worse, because we have the capacity, the resources to make sure that this is so utopian, but I really believe it. It's like, it could be better for everybody.
Well, when it comes to individualism in general, like, I don't know, I feel like there's like this sort of conundrum with it, right? I feel like at the same time, it can be our greatest strength and our greatest weakness. And I feel like over the past 10 years, it has been our greatest weakness. So
I've got one little plug I'm going to do, and that's for, who David Byrne is, right? Of the Talking Heads.
oh yeah.
Yeah.
The front man for the Talking Heads, that crazy guy. He started a website called Reasons to be Cheerful. He talks about it in a TED Talk on YouTube. You can see that. You can go to the website itself, and basically what it is, it's this site collects stories from all over the world about solutions people have found. Because when people are complaining about the way the things are in the world, I shut down immediately. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear what you think. I want to know what you're going to do. And these are all stories about people who've actually gone out and done it. They haven't had a great idea. They've actually developed the idea and achieved the idea. And I'm telling you, check that site out. It will cheer you up a lot.
Nice.
I've also been finding stories about, arts organizations that are more sort of focused locally than they are. We're all so dragged into this celebrity culture about what people you're never going to meet or doing to and with each other. It's like this, it's none of my business. I don't really care. I really don't,
Yeah.
So it's like, I'm not going to worry about the people who are making millions and millions of dollars in Hollywood, but locally you can support your arts by just going out and seeing it. Help out the people who are trying to make art in your community. Now, that's not necessarily something you can do for a voice actor. But, almost every voice actor I know started out in the theater, started out as an actor on stage or maybe an improviser or something like that. So go see improv shows, go see plays,
Totally. I enjoy going to the damn movies. I like seeing movies in the theater. So, and comedy, like in comedy shows and in art shows, like I like to go to these things because it inspires me. And I feel like it inspires you and a bunch of other people. It doesn't matter what industry you're in general. It's just when you go to these things, it opens up your mind to ideas. And the best things that have came out in the world when it comes to the creative arts, they have just all started out with an idea. That's all it is. It's an idea. Like Halo, it was just an idea. Yeah.
It most definitely was. And nobody had any idea that it would catch fire at all. It's one of the most hilarious things about it. Marty O'Donnell, who created the game, said, if we sell 60,000 copies of this game, I'm going to consider it a big hit.
Oh, wow. What? Oh, man.
Oh, yeah. Totally. Yeah, it was, nobody knew.
I guess the last thing I do want to touch on is just your upcoming projects. So is there anything that you can share that you're working on or you're in talks with like different studios and what you plan on doing in the next year or two?
Well, I don't really know that far ahead. I used to have a little bit more of that kind of a schedule, but I know I've got a couple of shows coming up that I'll be attending. There's one, I think it's going to be happening in October, early in October. It just popped up. I don't know if I can talk about it yet.
Yeah, that's fine.
Because we haven't signed a contract. And then I am going to be doing one in February. But again, I said something about it and my agent said, we're not releasing that information yet. And it's like, oh, well, too late. But and then as far as the rest of it's concerned, I'm very lucky to have great agents and they send me auditions and I audition all the time. But it was a little bit daunting to realize at a certain point that when in these days, when they look for a grandpa, they're looking for a 50-year-old. And it's like, whoa, so what am I? I mean, a corpse?
Oh, man.
Is that going to be my special skills? He can play, a person, a ghost or something. I don't know. It's very, no, the great thing about voice acting is like, it doesn't really matter what you look like or how old you are. You can do, I'd never get away with some of the stuff I get away with on stage.
Jeff, you said a lot of incredible things today, and I think you have a lot of wisdom that a lot of people, especially young people like Devin and I, could take to heart. And, I just want to say, like, Devin and I grew up on the same street, and one of the games we we played when we were really
We
little.
played Halo in the backyard. So, and we just cherish those moments. And when we're downstairs playing it and hearing double kill, triple kill, like it's just speaking with you today, it's just it brings a lot of warmth to our hearts, and we truly appreciate you joining us, man. It is such an honor to speak with you. Seriously,
It has been my absolute pleasure, guys. And one final note for me: don't give up hope.